Out on the other side of the argument, though, I'm sure at this point, John Warhurst, people normally come to you. But Philip Benwell, what about the argument that, I mean, do you subscribe to the argument? Is that what the monarchists are pushing? That it's not broke, don't fix it? Or is there something more that can be used to anchor the Queen in our constitutional system?
Well, we have a record of virtually unparalleled stability due to our constitution, and it's true, it isn't broken, it's working exceptionally well. We don't have real political or constitutional crisis in this country. Things are moving along. Even in the last election, when we had a hung parliament, governance continued, and that's due to our constitution. So it's not broken, and people don't really see a need to fix anything because there's nothing really to be fixed. It's just a talk about head of state. And I don't think the majority of people are really concerned about who is head of state. They're more interested in who is the head of government.
And where is the argument for you when it comes to the monarchist side? Is it about a passion for the Queen? Is it almost like cheering for a particular team, or is it more of a constitutional argument that this constitutional arrangement is more satisfying?
Well, it's a mixed bag. I mean, I'm a monarchist because I believe that our system of constitutional monarchy, with its checks and its balances, best protects the democracy and the freedoms of the people.
John Warhurst, is the place that we're at the moment, polling indicating a lack of interest or a relative lack of interest in the Republican idea. Is it a repudiation of your idea of the case for change at the minute?
No, not at all. I mean, even the worst poll that we've experienced for the Republic in recent times, some of your listeners will have seen the Australian news poll last Friday that showed that there are more Republicans than monarchists in Australia. Now, it's true, we need greater passion in the Republican cause, we need greater numbers, but let's not forget that there's always been, over the last 15 or 20 years, more Republicans than monarchists in Australia, and a large percentage of those Republicans are Republicans that take it very, very seriously, that really are strongly Republican. According to the poll, 25% of Australians are strongly Republican, and we need to convince those who are only mildly Republican to feel more passionate, and I think Richard Herr made some reference there. And I think we also need to continue to dispel ignorance. I was taken by the fact that when people are asked about their views on monarchy and republic in the last week or so, there's still a whole lot of furphies around. You know, there were young people who were involved perhaps in celebrating the royal wedding, saying, you know, we want to remain in the Commonwealth, or we want to retain our rights to work in Britain, and these sorts of things. A whole range of issues not connected with the constitutional position, and that's something that Republicans need to continue working on. And if I could make one final point in regard to Philip's point about stability, there's no, and whether it's broken or not, the movement towards the Republic has been happening in Australia for over 100 years. We've continued to modernise our domestic, political and constitutional relations. We've taken the move to have Australians as Governor-General. We've abolished appeals to the Privy Council. All of these were not done because of some notion that things were broken, but they were done because there was a recognition that we needed to move on, and we needed to look to the future, and we needed to have institutions which were much more definitely Australian than a British monarchy can ever provide to the Australian people.
But isn't it part of the problem there, John, that the Republican movement hasn't made the point that the Queen doesn't lead Australian trade missions to China? The Queen or the royal family don't, in fact, provide those ceremonial functions for Australia, that Australia, as really one of the world's major middle powers, was a significant factor. I mean, what, the fifth most traded currency in the world. We're one of the major funders of international organizations and arrangements for peace and humanitarian issues. And our ceremonial head isn't available to promote the national interest. And that's, I became aware of this very briefly, when I was at the opening of the Tin Wall a few years ago, when the Queen was there for the opening. And she's supposed to open the Tin Wall on the Isle of Man, as the Lord of Man, but she showed up as the Queen of the United Kingdom, and it was impossible to distinguish how she was going to exercise her responsibilities to the people of man by protecting them from the English when she was there as the Queen of England, in effect, rather than the Lord of Man. I mean, these are the confusions that diminish our capacity to use the kind of separation of the head of government and head of state that we have in a very practical and real sense. We don't get OBEs or whatever being given to the Australian cricket team when they win the Ashes, but the English.
I think that's a very good point, Richard. And of course, Republicans can make the case better and more strongly than we have. And you're making the point that the Australian monarchy is, in a sense, a hollow one, because it can't do for Australia what it can do for Britain, and it can't do for Australia what other European monarchies can do for their own countries. I was involved in a discussion about the Danish monarchy recently, and I couldn't argue with many of the points that the Danish spokesperson was making about the value of the Danish monarchy to Denmark. It was to do with national identity and tourism and economic development and all of these sorts of things, and people, and a monarchy who actually lived in the country. Now, I think Australians, and perhaps Republicans, need to make this point more strongly, can never have that sort of monarchy. We have a distant British monarchy sitting in as our head of state.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting. Richard, you had a point to make here.
I'll just say that mentioning the Danish monarchy, of course, in Tasmania, we've got Crown Princess Mary, and we're very proud of that, and we use her to promote that.
And Tasmanians are lucky in that regard, Richard and Leon, because you do have a slice of the action, and you have a slice of the action in a way the whole of Australia can't have a slice of the action as far as the British monarchy is concerned.
Philip Benwell, I wanted to ask you and touch on some of the points of confidence. I mean, Richard talked about who is looking after us at times. What does it say about us as a middle-ranking power that we don't feel like we can look after our own constitutional affairs? Aren't we like the child that never leaves home? Why aren't we cool enough to look after ourselves?
It's only a section of people that feel that way. I mean, the fact is, our ceremonial head is essentially the Governor-General, who is an Australian. The fact about OBEs, the Order of the British Empire, Imperial Honours, that's a decision of the Australian government. If the Australian government wanted to restore imperial honours, it could. We have the Order of Australia, which the Queen is sovereign. We have our own honours, which we bestow upon our cricketers. It's not about the British having something we don't have. We had it, and we didn't want it. We established our own order. We became Australian. And I mean, there's a lot of furphies about, and we've heard several of them in this programme. Now, as far as not being able to use the Queen heading trade missions, if the Australian government requested the Queen or Prince Charles or Prince William to perform a duty on behalf of Australia, then that's something that would probably be done. It's a matter for Australia and the Australian government. It's not that the Queen says, oh no, I'm British, I can't do that. It's the Australian government that appoints Australians, the Prime Minister, who's the head of our government, the most actively powerful person in the country, or the Governor-General, who is our effective head of state following appointment, because the Governor-General assumes the role of the Crown in this country. It's a system that we have that's Australian.
On your local ABC this morning, our Friday forum, Philip Benwell, John Warhurst and Richard Herr, our guests this morning. I don't think we got